The definition for cybersecurity is really about protecting your information assets, and I'm putting it loosely, and against unauthorized access or attack. And that's really what cybersecurity is about. You have your assets, you might be a user of a laptop, but it's really about understanding what controls you have around it to mitigate this type of issue. I think what's important is really about the extent of and the volume of data that we're seeing on a global basis. What we're seeing is the activity from a Facebook perspective, from a Google perspective, from an email perspective. If I could just read you some of the stats. What we're seeing is on every minute there's 98,000 tweets, 695,000 Facebook status updates, 168 million emails sent, and 694,000 plus Google searches every minute. That shows you the extent of world activity from that perspective. The other side of that is obviously in terms of big data. So for the enthusiast that understands big data, appreciates unstructured data, what are they doing from that perspective? Analytics, those are industries that are thriving on this type of growth of information. The first one I want to address the audit committees on is really about the government intervention. From a cybersecurity perspective, there's the Cyber Crimes and Cybersecurity Bill 2015, very recent bill that's just come out, been published by the Department of Justice, open for public comment until the 30th of November. What this bill tries to achieve is really about understanding 5 key themes. The first one is really about active role in defending citizens, investigating, responding, and prosecuting anybody that's found wanting in this area, improve law enforcement, public advocacy and attribution, and international cooperation to promote cybersecurity. So as an audit committee member or as a risk committee member, you need to understand the context of this bill from a compliance perspective. It'll be interesting to see what organizations are going to be doing to make sure that they tick the box against compliance, like any other legislation you may have. Coupled to this, obviously, important things like POPI, your King Code, your compliance to King Code. So these are things that you need to be aware of from a cybersecurity perspective. Coincidentally, this month, the October month, within the US, United States, it's actually a National Cybersecurity Month, where President Obama has actually pushed out and said, look, we're calling this Cybersecurity Month because we want more awareness from that perspective. I think within the context of South Africa, from a governance perspective, it's important that we also appreciate the context of this topic and how it impacts on our lives, of our people, of our companies that operate here, even multinationals for that matter. From a South African perspective, what we're seeing is that 70% of active South African users have fallen victim to cybercrime, compared to a global average of 50%. So it tells you how far we're off from a security perspective. The second important stat is from a phishing perspective, and these are users that masquerade. For example, you often see this from a bank giving notification, please beware of phishing. It's really about third highest rate of phishing attacks in the world. From a cybercrime perspective, FBI lists South Africa as the most active country, 6th most active country in which cybercrime takes place. So those are just some of the stats related to South Africa from a cybersecurity perspective. I think what's important is really understanding the context of cybersecurity, and it's really about where does it fit within the IT governance perspective. What's important to know is there's a chapter dedicated in King on IT governance, and one of the principles of King, the King Code talks about, and it's principle 5.6, boards should ensure that information assets are managed effectively, and the need to implement information security management system. So I think really the call to action on board is really understanding being a good leader, a good corporate citizen, and doing what's best in the interest of your shareholder, protecting their assets, protecting their reputation, etc. The second one is the growth within the mobile space is obviously growing at a phenomenal rate, and those are your tablets, etc. And from that perspective, what do we have from a board? Do we have a bring your own device policy? What our policy framework around these type of things? If our users have devices where they got corporate information, corporate emails, what happens and how do we purge that information should a device get lost? Because it's all sensitive IP. So it's important from that perspective. Cybercrime is not an IT issue. I think very importantly, it just can't be packaged to say, please IT deal with cyber. It's a business-wide issue. It's similar to business continuity management. It's not just an IT issue. Also from a control perspective is having some sort of a control matrix to make sure that all your assets, all the threats that are affecting your organization and all the controls linked to that are actually in place. And also seeking optimal balance of risk and return from a security perspective. So I'm not saying this jumps the agenda, but this certainly should form part of the agenda. And it's really about understanding your role as a board member or an audit committee member, about whether you want to treat this risk, tolerate the risk, terminate the risk, and transfer in the risk. And then finally, I think the journey here is not going to be a once-off. It's probably going to be a long, winded road that you need to get there. But it's really about understanding where you are from a maturity perspective and where you'd like to be. The example I gave earlier is if you're a bank, you can't be at a level 3 out of 5 in terms of maturity. You need to be 5. It's just so obvious. Because imagine your reputation will be impacted should a user be hacked, etc. So that kind of, that risk and return type of analysis should be done.